interesting is the last few lines. It says, how can even the gods know how creation happened? Because even they were created after creation happened. How can even the gods know how creation happened? Because even they were created after creation happened. Perhaps the only one who knows is the one most high. Uses the term Adhyaksha. Okay. Perhaps the only one who knows is the one most high, or perhaps even he doesn't know. That's a traditional, the skeptic approach, that how can you be sure of anything? And you must be willing to question everything, including what we believe today of our scientific theories. For all you know, 50 years later, they'll be laughing that we believe in the Big Bang Theory, because a new theory could emerge, for all you know. Like today, I'm sure many of you are aware that what we learned in our school physics, much of it has actually proven to be either incomplete or wrong. Because now it's discovered that matter makes up only 4% of the universe's density. In fact, most of the universe's density is made up of dark energy and dark matter. Nobody has any clue what it is. They're just calling it dark energy, dark matter. 50 years later, we may have a new theory. So I think perhaps the only thing which to me makes sense is to have the Nasiri approach, have the humility to understand that we don't know everything. Our job is to discover more and more and more. And when we've discovered everything, then we won't feel any attachments, because at that time we'll be God. But if we aren't God, it means we haven't discovered everything. Books are actually linked. Those of you who've read The Sign of Ikshvaku and read the Shiva trilogy, I'm sure you guys must have decoded some clues, right? In The Sign of Ikshvaku, which links it to the Shiva trilogy. As you read the subsequent books that will come out, it will become even more obvious how it is linked. I've left clues in the Shiva trilogy for what will happen in the Ramchandra series. Not just that, the Ramchandra series has 5 books. It'll probably take 6 or 7 years for me to complete their entire series. 8-9 years later, I might start a new series, say on the Mahabharata perhaps. Whenever that is released, you can read the Mahabharata series and then come back to the Shiva trilogy. You'll find I've left clues out there for the Mahabharata series as well. That might, I don't know how many books that will take. So the next series could launch maybe 12-13 years later. That may probably be on Lord Rudra and Lady Mohini. When you read that, you can come back to the Shiva trilogy. You will find I've left clues out there for the Lord Rudra, Lady Mohini series as well. I might write the story on Lord Parashuram 15-16 years later. When you read that, come back to the Shiva trilogy. I've left clues out there. I might write on Lord Brahma 19-20 years later. When I write that, come back to the Shiva trilogy, I've left clues out there. I might write on Lord Manu. Someone has been decoding the clues. I might write on Lord Manu. Sorry? Correct. I might write on that 23-24 years later, come back to the Shiva trilogy, I've left clues out there. Wow. That was a very esoteric small clue I'd left. I'm amazed you caught on to that. Yes, I might write on Akhenaten as well. 26-27 years later, come back to the Shiva trilogy, I've left clues out there. The entire series, they're all linked in my head. Why are they linked? Because all these stories are spread over a 9,000 year period. From when the Vedic culture began, to more than 12,000 years ago, to when the Vedic culture of our age got destroyed 3,500 years ago. And I believe all of us are their unworthy descendants. All my stories are spread over a 9,000 year period, the high points and the low points of the Vedic people of our age. That's why they are all linked. That's my plan for the next 20-25 years. Hopefully you guys will keep buying the book, so I'll keep writing. Otherwise I might have to go back to banking. As I promised, very short speech. I just wanted to tell you about the long-term plan that I have. And post this now, we will have the question and answer. There are many versions of the Ramayana, and that is the beauty of our approach to our stories. That there are many different interpretations possible, and we celebrate all of them. So in my version, there are some that have been interpreted from different versions of the Ramayana, like for example, the battle between Lord Dashrath and Ravan. It's inspired from the Anand Ramayana, which interestingly is also credited to Valmiki ji, which is different from the original Valmiki Ramayana, of course. And there are some which is the way the story occurred to me. So some of them are interpretations of different versions of the Ramayana, and some of them my own interpretations.
This is your interpretation.
And some of them my own interpretations. And that is the beauty of the Indian way. If we do it with respect and with love, as Tulsidas ji did, as all of us do, as Tulsidas ji said, जैसे हमारा मन है वैसे ही राम जी दिखते हैं.
आप लिखा है.
Starts unfolding. That's what I put in the story.
You have written also that the Dashrath, in the childhood, Dashrath was not the.
Lord Ram is not the favorite son.
Yeah,
he is not the favorite son, and he becomes the favorite son later, which means he earns it. He's not born with it; he earns it. He earns it through his deeds. And to me, I saw this as very inspiring. That he wasn't born with it; he earns it through his karma, which is the message that Lord Ram gives to all of us. That you have to earn everything that you have. You shouldn't just claim it on your birth. You have to do your deeds, do your karma, and then earn it. Earn that respect, earn the love of those around you. So to me that sounded inspiring. And there are versions of the Ramayana like this as well. When I was young. All of us have, you're young, are you still in college?
I'm just pass out doctor right now.
Oh, you're a doctor? Oh wow, okay. I graduated in mathematics. Okay. I was a completely left-brained, science-oriented kind of guy. I did my MBA from right here in Calcutta. I worked in financial services for 14 years. I was never creative when I was young. I was active in sports, boxing, gymnastics, competitive sports. The only creative thing I did was I was a singer of our band in Calcutta, but I never wrote the music. I only performed what someone else wrote. I was never creative at all, which is why I know it might sound strange, but I genuinely believe, because I didn't know fiction before the Immortals of Meluva. I genuinely believe these are the blessings of Lord Shiva. I genuinely believe it, because if I had such brilliant creative skills, I would have shown some sign when I was young. Most of my school friends, even my MBA friends who meet me, they actually say, "Yaar, sach bata, actually kisne likha hai?" Because they can't believe that I did this. Okay. So, since it's a passion and it's a blessing from him, then your blessing tends to emerge in an area that you have a passion in. And I have a passion for our mythology, for our scriptures. My grandfather was a Pandit in Kashi. Both my parents are deeply religious, so I learned much of what I know from my family. And since I had a passion in this area, I guess the story is just emerged in this area. Having said that, I also want to say there's a lot of beauty in our ancient scriptures, in our stories, a lot of wonderful liberal messages which we can learn from today. So which is why I like to speak of it. I need to do research while writing. Like the day I decided that I'd write on Lord Ram, I started writing the next day. Why is that? Because I've already learnt many of these things, in my childhood. Like I said, I learned a lot from my grandfather, who was a Pandit. I learned a lot from my parents. I learned our scriptures the old-fashioned way, through listening. Right? I read a lot as well. I read at least 4 or 5 books per month, and I've been reading at that pace for decades. So all that knowledge goes somewhere in the back of the head. When I was doing all this reading 10, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years ago, I had no idea that I was going to use it in a book. I just read because I loved reading. And most of my reading is in this area, is in the area of mythology, science, spirituality, our philosophy, the Upanishads, the Vedas. So I've read many of these things, so the knowledge remains somewhere in the back of the head till Lord Shiva kind of puts it together into a story.
Thank you.
Where we were building things even when the athletes were coming in. They had well-laid plans for all their volunteers, because most Chinese don't speak English, so they had standard lines, for English translations, so often written in Mandarin itself, and then they were distributed to their volunteers so they could communicate with the foreigners. But that wasn't enough for the Chinese government. The Chinese government decided that even the citizens of Beijing have to look good. Okay, it being China, they just decided, So they came out. I'm not joking. They came out with a dress code for the Beijing citizens. Okay, separate dress code for men, separate dress code for women. It was decided that women beyond a particular age would wear a skirt of a certain length. Women below a particular age would wear a skirt of another certain length, a shorter length. And they came out with this guideline. What do you think happened in Beijing?
Everyone followed.
They followed. The government says you follow. Now imagine if the Indian government had come out with a guideline like this during the Commonwealth Games. What do you think Indians would have done?
Just the opposite.
तुमने स्कर्ट पहनने को बोला, मैं साड़ी पहनूंगी, भाड़ में जाऊं. Correct? That's what Indians would have done. So what does that make Indians?
General.
Correct. We are naturally rebellious people. Naturally. And the Chinese, on average, are naturally slightly compliant people. The Japanese. I'm not saying that coloring an entire culture that way would be a little simplistic. All of us have a Suryavanshi and Chandravanshi within us, but some part tends to dominate. Correct? Indians, we are naturally freedom loving. We are naturally passionate. Let's be honest, we are not really law abiding. Okay? Even when we follow the law, it's always very tactical. We use the law to point fingers at politicians. Correct? But say our favorite actor is in trouble with the law, what will Indians say? The hell with the law. Correct? Sorry? Americans are actually also quite Chandravanshi, my belief. They have Suryavanshi abilities as well. So I'm not saying any way is better or worse. They're just two different ways of life. And I believe that you should do what comes naturally to you while being aware of the downsides of your way of life and being aware of the strengths. So the Suryavanshis, when their strengths are, they are naturally efficient. They tend at their peaks. They are very efficient. They are very just. But at their worst, the Suryavanshis can be rigid, even fanatical. The Chandravanshis at their best can be very creative, very passionate, very nurturing. Actually, I must clarify that incident, the way it is described, I will not give details because there are still many who haven't read Sign of Ikshvaku. That incident, the way it's described, is inspired more by two cases that happened in the US, actually. The way it is described, or what actually happened. But there's a similarity between those two incidents in the US and in the Delhi incident, that they were all committed by adolescents, by juvenile criminals. And all I'm suggesting is we need to have a calm debate about this issue. There is a problem of juvenile crime in India. It's rising fast, and it's not just in the case of rape, but I'm talking about armed robbery, murder, terrorism. This is a serious problem. Ignoring it is not going to make it go away. And our present system is clearly not working. What I want to trigger is, let's have a calm debate on this issue. The Western world also faced these issues in the 1990s, and they came up with some solutions which seem to have worked. For example, they decided in most of the Western countries now, and they changed these laws in the 90s and the 2000s, if you commit a serious crime, you will be treated as an adult. The age for being treated as an adult for a serious crime was lowered from 18 to, in some countries, 15, some countries 13, some countries to as low as 10. The youngest rapist in the world, by the way, was a 10-year-old. I was just shocked. I just couldn't believe it. They made these changes in their laws to control this problem. All I'm suggesting is we need to have a calm debate on this issue. That's all. We're just ignoring this issue completely. Or we react with complete anger. No, hang them publicly. That's not... We're not Pakistan, yeah. We can't behave that way. Hang them publicly. What nonsense is this? We're a civilized country. But let's have a calm reasonable debate. What do we do about this issue? That's all that I'm hoping to trigger. Credit and say that this is my approach, but that would be a lie. Because this approach has been there in India for millennia. There are various approaches to approaching God. One is the Nirgun Nirakar, the formless God. In fact, in traditional Sanskrit, you couldn't even use the term he for him. Sanskrit is one of the few languages which has 3 genders. English doesn't. It is not a gender. That is, it's for objects. Okay, because the formless God, also called Brahman in ancient times, different from the caste Brahmin, Brahman was even beyond gender. That's the first concept of God. There's a second concept of God where God took a form, Akar. Okay, like in the traditional forms that we see, Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, Shaktima, etc. There's a third concept of God where God is born as a creature, as a human being, or as any other creature. That's an avatar. Does his karma, leaves his mortal body, goes back up. And there's a fourth concept of God, which is actually in a way linked to the first Nirgun Nirakar, that God exists within every single one of us, not just human beings, but in every living being and every inanimate thing as well. God is everywhere. And those who we worship as gods are those who discovered the God within. Okay. Now I find this concept very inspiring because it means all of us have a God within. And it's up to us to discover that God within. I've always found this concept inspiring, so maybe that's why the stories occurred to me this way.